What's up guys, TechTine here, and we have an exclusive look at the all-new Samsung Galaxy A54 5G. This is a highly anticipated and a highly requested phone, and I'm really excited to cover this phone and see how far we can push it. But if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so that way you stay tuned for those videos. With that being said, let's talk about the design of this device. So this time around, Samsung did go a little bit further than they usually do with these types of devices, and they decided to upgrade the material. And so the back of this phone is made out of glass instead of plastic from previous generations, which is a nice touch from Samsung. They're really moving up. Alright, so the back also has a triple camera setup, and from a design perspective, the camera lenses do protrude quite a bit. And if you think about it, this phone kind of looks really familiar with the S23 lineup, doesn't it? So this is kind of like the little brother of that. Now, on the bottom of the phone, you do get your loudspeaker, two microphones, and USB Type-C that does support up to 25-watt fast charging. Beautiful. However, you don't get a headphone jack anymore. Samsung really killed it this time around, but that's all right. I mean, it's not the end of the world. Now, the right-hand side does have your power button slash volume up and down. And these buttons are really clicky, really tactile, so no problem at all. Now the sides of the phone are made out of plastic. They have to cut costs somewhere, and I don't really mind it. I guess it gives it kind of a lighter feel than it actually is, even though it's heavier than last year's generation A53. Now, let's talk about the front of the phone because that's where the excitement comes. So this time around, Samsung did upgrade the display. So you do get a 1080p OLED display, supports 120 Hz. You have an optical fingerprint sensor. And if we compare it to last year's generation, the A53 did have a peak brightness of 800 nits and didn't support HDR. This time around, really, Samsung did take it to the next level. So a peak brightness of 1000 nits and does support HDR10 content. So let's put this display as a whole. Resolution on point, 1080p, 402 pixels per inch. You should not have a problem with it at all. So it's not quite a 2K display, but I feel like it's the same display as the S23. Maybe the S23 is slightly brighter, but reality is it's hard to notice the difference. And this phone also supports the ability to refresh up to 120 Hz. Now it's not going to be doing it all the time, but when needed, that's when it's going to do it. And also, it does have a really neat feature. So I can confidently say it's back. So the double tap to wake and the double tap to sleep is here. And you can also do a single tap to kind of activate this always on display. And you can turn it off in the setting. As far as your content consumption, beautiful. So watching your videos, scrolling your social media, playing games, things like that, it will be an enjoyable experience for sure. You will not notice that you have a mid-range device. Now, take a listen to the speaker and I'll give you a couple of words on that. These are the prices that we're going to work with. And look, these phones are built and designed kind of differently, but you can tell that they're made by Samsung. However, they both have distinct factors that make them unique from one another. And that's the first category that we're going to discuss, which is the design, starting with the Galaxy A23. So the speaker is loud, clear, and off of first impressions, seems to be really good. Now let's switch topics and talk about the camera system on this phone. So like I said before, it does have a triple camera setup, but here are the specs of the camera. So we have a 50 megapixel main sensor at f1.8 aperture, and it does support optical image stabilization, thumbs up. And you also get another sensor, which is a 12 megapixel sensor at f2.2 and does support ultra-wide 123 degrees field of view. And you also have a 5 megapixel f2.4 macro sensor. Does support HDR content. You can record 4K up to 30 frames per second, 1080p 30-60 frames, and slow-mo video 720p at 480 frames per second. The camera seems to be on point off of first impression. However, the camera lens does protrude quite a bit, so I do recommend a case on it. That way you don't scratch those lenses and ruin this supposedly great camera. Now, as far as the interface goes, it's typical Samsung interface. Quick, simple to use, straight to the point, can navigate through your lenses with a single button and takes pictures really quickly. And I do have to say that whatever Taptic engine that Samsung is using on this phone is really nice. So taking pictures, it does give you like this slight haptic feedback, ever so slight, but to me it makes a difference. So the picture quality off of impressions seems to be sharp, vivid, really good quality. However, I do have to do more testing, so a full camera review is needed for that. Stay tuned, stay subscribed. Now let's talk about the performance of this phone. So this phone has the following specs. So this time around, Samsung decided to use a octa-core Exynos 1380 built on a 5nm architecture. So 4 of the cores are clocked at 2.4 GHz and the other 4 are clocked at 2 GHz. And in this particular model, you also get 6 gigabytes of RAM, 128 gigabytes of standard storage. Now, you can opt for a model that has 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage, or 8 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage. I did a couple of Geekbench tests, and here's what I got. The average result was around 1,000 single core and around 2,800 multi-core, which is miles ahead of last year's generation, which I believe it was around like 1800 or 1900. So definitely a big performance improvement. And as far as your daily tasks, it ran it smoothly and beautifully. So very quick messaging app, phone app, browser, camera, YouTube, anything that requires like these simple tasks, it will do it in an instant. Really fast, really good performer. And as far as the battery life, like I said before, it does support up to 25-watt fast charging, no wireless charging. However, you also get a nicely sized 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which is larger than the Galaxy S23. So keep that in mind when you're trying to make a purchasing decision. And this phone also supports an IP67 water and dust resistance. Now, as a package, off of first impressions, here's what I have to say about this phone. Extremely positive impressions, extremely positive. Now the price of this phone is around $449. Is that a competitive price point? Yes. Now when you think of that price point, you kind of go into that Pixel OnePlus territory, so it needs to be able to compete with these phones in order to kind of get a place for itself in that type of category. Now I have to do my testing on it, and I will, and I'm gonna push it just like I do with my other phones. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for the full review. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.